Good afternoon and happy World Oceans Day to you. Today, the Inter-American Development Bank has brought together key leaders and experts to discuss the importance of oceans to sustainable development, climate action, and economic recovery in Latin America and the Caribbean. Oceans and seas cover more than 2/3 of our planet's surface. They are home to diverse ecosystems and spectacular plants and animals. Healthy oceans contribute to poverty reduction and economic development by providing jobs, food, minerals, international trade routes, and cultural connections. However, ocean and coastal ecosystems are under threat due to decades of overuse and pollution, as well as coastal development. With this knowledge, we all have a responsibility to protect the ocean. My name is Golda Lee Bruce, and I am a communications specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank. It's my pleasure to welcome you. We have an exciting and informative hour planned for you. So let's get the ball rolling with a message from the Executive Vice President of the Inter-American Development Bank, Reina Mejia.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this celebration of World Oceans Day. Today, we recognize the great importance of the natural assets, ecosystem services, cultural significance, and livelihoods supported by our oceans. Oceans are very important to our planet, to all of us, and Latin America and the Caribbean are no exceptions. Yes, believe it or not, more than 25% of our region's population lives on the coast and depends on ocean resources for food, transportation, energy, recreation, medicine, scientific research, and socio-cultural connections. And at the end of the day, we are all somehow interconnected with our oceans. The value of the global ocean economy is impressive. It is estimated to be around $1.5 trillion per year, and is expected to double by 2030. Its value comes from traditional resources such as fisheries, productive coastlines, and shipping, but also includes emerging non-traditional resources such as carbon absorption. In our region, we know this very well. The ocean economy in the Caribbean represents around 17% of their GDP. And let's take a picture of this. The coral reef system along the coast of Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras contributes $3.9 billion from tourism. Nice picture, right? On the other hand, ocean industries are expected to make an important contribution to employment growth. Yes, according to the OECD, these industries anticipate employing around 40 million people by 2030. But unfortunately, not all are good news. The health and productivity of our oceans are increasingly under heavy pressure from several factors, from unsustainable fishing practice to improper waste management, not to mention plastic pollution and the loss of coastal and marine ecosystems. However, there is hope, as actions are arising globally and within our region to support the health and productivity of our seas and coastal areas. In line with these efforts, we at the IDB are strongly committed to support our member countries in the preservation of our oceans and the sustainable management of their resources. As we speak, here at the IDB Group, we are actively promoting the blue economy. What is this? Well, the blue economy is a key element to address climate change and biodiversity challenges, as well as boosting economic opportunities, employment, and social inclusion for local communities. This approach is very aligned with Vision 2025, our blueprint to accelerate a sustainable and inclusive post-pandemic recovery. We recognize that this approach will require a new level of innovation if our efforts are to be successful. For example, we recently approved a $200 million guarantee for the Bahamas to support the creation of a social and inclusive blue economy program, main focus on micro, small, and medium businesses. The conditions that this guarantee was based on are all related to the maintenance of a healthy and productive ocean. And we continue introducing innovative solutions. Last year in Glasgow at the Climate Change Conference, COP26, IDB Invest, our private sector arm, issued the first blue bond in Latin America and the Caribbean, valued around $35 million. Innovative financing for oceans is a rapidly emerging sector. The use of financial instruments such as blue bonds are providing solutions to help mobilize capital, attract new investors, and create sustainable business opportunities in oceans conservation and sustainable tourism. Blue carbon market from mangrove and seagrass ecosystems are taking shape within the region to help respond to the impacts of climate change and build resilience in local communities. We are supporting these efforts through our UK Blue Carbon Fund, which focuses on mangrove restoration and conservation projects in countries across Latin America and the Caribbean. Mangroves provide numerous benefits and services. In fact, it is estimated that the average annual carbon absorption rate for mangrove per hectare is about 2 to 4 times greater than rates observed in mature tropical forests. These are a few examples of what the IDB is doing to advance the blue economy in the region. As mentioned before, the blue economy is a key driver that fosters regional integration, innovation, and economic diversification. It is also a vehicle to accelerate inclusion, especially for women and vulnerable groups, as you will learn from our panelists later today. I invite you to celebrate this day. Working together, we can build a new economic, environmental, and social pact that balances the use of our oceans in a responsible and sustainable manner, while supporting the productivity and livelihoods of our local communities. We have great momentum to seize the opportunities our oceans provide. Now is the time to accelerate the blue economy. The time is now to become a key driver in transitioning to an inclusive, low carbon, and resilient future. Let's work together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, EVP Reina Mejia, for reminding us of why we're all here today. We're here to talk about the economy and accelerating the blue economy. Growing up in the Caribbean, so often we took for granted those waters that we saw almost every day of our lives. And now we have the opportunity to really be partners with the environment in this. And so to learn a little bit more, here's a short video for your information.
The oceans are our planet's major ecosystem, hosting some of the most amazing species and providing invaluable services to all. To ensure sustainable use of its natural capital, the blue economy opens a new set of possibilities that can boost economic development, inclusion, and climate change resilience. Latin America and the Caribbean holds great potential by turning to the blue economy, since it is estimated that more than 1/4 of its population lives nearby and depends on ocean resources for their livelihoods and food security. Stakeholders in the region are already exploring opportunities in the blue economy. Projects in Jamaica, the Bahamas, and Belize are delivering great results for local economies and communities. In Jamaica, researchers and local communities are working on restoring and conserving mangroves to increase blue carbon sinks and enhance resiliency to climate change.
The mangroves along 40 kilometers of the coastline in South Clarendon have died back. And the main causes of dieback have been hurricanes, as well as hard structures interfering with the flow of water, as well as dieback or fall off of irrigation runoff upstream. The solution and fixing of the mass dieback of mangroves start with engaging the community and getting their input into what's wrong and how to fix it. That goes in parallel with in-depth gathering of evidence. One, from the sea, to see how it affects tidal flushing. Two, the mangrove itself and its characteristics. Three, the lands behind the mangrove that also bring water into the mangrove. And the watershed. All of that will be combined into a massive evidence base, which will provide us with alternatives for nature-based solutions, such as clearing of canals that are blocked and grading of beaches that impair the tides coming in and out.
In the Bahamas, innovative financial mechanisms are being adopted to facilitate the development of new businesses and investments. Through Blue Economy investments, the country supports micro, small, and medium enterprises and the sustainability of its marine and coastal assets.
Following the devastating social and economic impacts of Hurricane Dorian and the COVID-19 pandemic, the Bahamas urgently needs to look for economic recovery and diversification opportunities to enhance its resilience to natural disasters and climate change. Ecosystems such as mangroves, seagrass beds, and coral reefs provide invaluable services that could become the drivers of a new economy. Through the Guarantee Instrument, building a social and inclusive blue economy in the Bahamas, the country is already innovating and incorporating a financial mechanism that will boost the development of a new and more sustainable ocean-based economic sectors.
In Belize, aquaculture innovations are helping local shrimp producers recover by promoting sustainable practices and good stewardship of marine resources.
In Belize, we have been working with Belize shrimp growers to help them both access high-value niche markets and also to be able to better manage pests that in the past have decimated their entire production. So we help the Belize shrimp growers do two things. One, to certify under the Aquaculture Stewardship Council standards, which are the most stringent environmental and social standards for the production of shrimp that allow them to penetrate high-value niche markets in Europe and to increase employment. And we also help them build a biosecurity protocol that collectively allow them to monitor the health of their ponds in real time.
The blue economy is key to achieving IDB's Vision 2025. If you want to learn more about our work on the blue economy in Latin America and the Caribbean, please visit the Sustainable Islands platform, where you will find information about these projects, our events, and the newest reports on our innovations.
Well, so much to digest in that video, and I'm sure we'll be sharing that link with you for the Sustainable Islands platform in the chat so that you can access it today and moving forward. It's time now to get into our panel discussion, but before we do that, we just want to welcome all of you who have just joined us for this discussion celebrating World Oceans Day. Happy World Oceans Day to you. Our panel discussion on perspective of the blue economy in Latin America and the Caribbean, perspectives of the blue economy in Latin America and the Caribbean. And for this segment, We've brought together several sectoral specialists from sustainable finance, natural resource management, climate mitigation, innovation, and circular economy. And this segment of our event today will be moderated by Jared Aleng. He is a senior climate change specialist at the Inter-American Development Bank and a dear colleague of mine. Jared, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Golda. And again, welcome everyone to IDB's celebration on World Oceans Day. You know, as we join the rest of the world to celebrate our oceans, I see a lot of the messages coming in. You know, everybody is excited about the oceans. You know, and under the theme of this year's World Ocean Day is revitalization, collective action for the ocean. And I think we are really going to be hearing some very informative sectoral work. As Gloria said, I'm Jared Allen, Climate Change Senior Specialist with the IDB. And it's really a privilege for me to be working in the field of oceans and on the blue economy, and to be able to interact with exceptional people working on these issues, some of whom you will hear shortly. But on this issue of the blue economy, there is an increasing recognition and emphasis on its critical importance of the ability to utilize ocean resources in a manner that is sustainable, that is inclusive, that is circular to the approach of waste management, and that addresses the impacts of climate change. And you know, we now have the climate change conference going on in Bonn, and again, the issue of blue economy and how it fits into the climate change agenda will be in the forefront. We do know that there are critical issues and threats to the health of oceans, and we did hear that from Rena, our EVP. And that need to be addressed. But today, we want to celebrate the ocean. We want to celebrate its cultural significance, its environmental and economic services, the intrinsic value that the oceans have in the daily lives of people, particularly in our region of Latin America and the Caribbean. We recognize that these assets go beyond that of fisheries, tourism, and recreation, but includes energy, logistics, biotechnology, biological diversity, and historical relevance. Every day we are discovering new aspects of this vast and important blue space around us. Whether it is that we can create a bioplastic alternative for packaging material from sargassum. I know sargassum is in the news currently as it's appearing again on our shores. Or that mangroves, as we heard, can store, sequester carbon at a rate that is 4 times that of terrestrial forests. And for one who used to crawl around in mangroves, this is a vindication of an important life choice. Or that at the end of this decade, over 40 million people will be employed in ocean-based industries in fast-growing areas such as offshore wind energy, marine agriculture, fish processing, and port activities. Today, we really want to touch on some of those developments. So have a conversation with some of the people that are working in these areas to get their insights on their work and to hear what they think the future of the blue economy might look like. To this end, let me get into the panel. Let me introduce the panel, starting with Dr. Monica Grasso. She's the Chief Economist at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA. Dr. Terence Forrester, Chief Scientist at Solutions for Developing Countries, University of the West Indies. My colleagues, Claudia Stevenson, Sector Lead Specialist at the IDB, and Yuri Shakalal, Senior Sector Specialist at the IDB. And I want to start with you, Yuri, mainly because you have been working in this space for a number of years. And it's a traditional area of the blue economy, coastal zone management. And I want to hear from you, what's the value and importance of managing marine or coastal space to the blue economy? Yuri.
Thank you, Gerard, and thank you for the opportunity to contribute a few of my thoughts. And happy World Oceans Day, everyone. I'm of the view that integrated coastal zone management can provide lessons of experience to guide the governance of contemporary blue economy development agendas, and an operational and institutional philosophy that can serve as a foundation or platform on which new and more diverse blue economy thrusts can be built, as opposed to quote unquote starting from scratch or total reinvention of operational management. ICZM is based or premised on an integrated, multidisciplinary, scientific, evidence-based, and participatory approach to the management of coastal resources that strikes a balance between resource utilization, between diverse and competing users for economic purposes on the one hand, and conservation, maintenance, and enhancement of critical ecosystem functions on the other, which will be inevitably a similar type of approach that we will require for expanded blue economy development. ICZM and investment in ICZM evolved from a recognition of the economic value contribution of coastal resources, increasing competition, conflict, and diminishing quality for limited resources. I think we've seen a little bit of that earlier. And as well, the complexity or the intersectoral and interdisciplinary nature of the observed problems. While there's insufficient time to go into extensive detail, I think if we look back at the importance of and contribution of the historic trajectory of coastal resources utilization in the region by small island states, we can see that there is a recognized need, or there is and was a recognized need to manage these resources more effectively for sustainability, given competition for use and the intensity of development pressure that is visited upon these finite resources. We can see that those administrations which developed and executed long-term and institutionalized science-based integrated coastal zone management public policy programs have been better able to delay, avert, mitigate problems with the underlying natural resource base and human interactions, and in some instances been able to enhance and improve amenity value and functions of some ecosystems. So key to this, I would say, Gerard, is a dedicated investment to build scientific knowledge and management capacities using technology. In sum, I would say that ICZM offers a technical governance approach for scaling up the management of offshore blue space. It might be a bad analogy, but I like to say that blue economy governance is akin to ICZM on steroids. Importantly, and lastly, when there's an absence of detailed scale-specific data for new blue economy investment decision makings and the absence of related public policy, I think ICZM offers us structured tools like adaptive management and learning by doing, precautionary pilot project experimental approaches that can still allow incremental informed development rather than paralysis or no action. So I'll leave it for there for now and toss it back to you, Gerard. Thank you.
Thanks for that. And I will keep, I think there will be a hashtag ICZM on steroids, blue economy. We will use that. But you did also mention the critical importance of managing these resources effectively. And I want to bring in Monica here into this. Mainly because there's, and you did mention about the interconnected elements of this. And one of the critical things in terms of being able to manage these resources effectively, we need to know what's their importance, what's their value, what's the contribution that these various elements of the blue economy provide to the national economies. And I know you have been doing a lot of work in this area, and we really want to hear from you on that. Monica.
Thank you so much, Gerard. And thank you for inviting me to participate in the panel today. It's an honor to be here, and happy World Oceans Day to everybody. So I don't know if you're all familiar with the agency that I'm working with. It's NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. And this is a US agency that is basically a scientific agency that is responsible to monitor the US oceans and fisheries, and we also develop charts and conduct deep sea exploration. So ocean is one of our main missions. And as a chief economist at NOAA, we have been struggling and trying to see what are the best ways for us to measure our blue economy. So I'll say, ideally, the ideal way for us to measure the blue economy would be to include the market values. So using the national accounts and use market-based transactions, and also to include the no-market values. That would include ecosystem assessments, cultural values, etc. So the no-market values. So at NOAA, we are actually working on both fronts. And so we have partnered with our statistical office, that is the US Bureau of Economic Analysis. And this is the statistical agency that publishes the US GDP every year. And so we have been working for about 5 years to develop a market-based measure of the US economy. And we develop what we call a satellite account, which measures the contribution of the marine-dependent industries and activities to the US economy. So this was 5 years of work and developing methodology that has been now used by many other countries. And in the US, we were able to measure 10 different sectors. So we have the traditional sectors like commercial fishing, shipbuilding, recreational, tourism and recreation. But we also included sectors like construction, education, professional development. And for example, in construction, we have investments that are related to beach nourishment, reconstruction of coastal areas, etc. And of course, we have living resources that include the fisheries, but we also have upcoming sectors like the marine pharmaceuticals. It's a really interesting aspect in the marine economy. So this information is out. Our official publication was last year. We are publishing the 2020 results tomorrow. That will show the impact of the first year of the pandemic in the marine economy. And this information has been useful for the policymakers to understand the current state of the national marine economy. Also, investors have been using this information to track industries, to better understand where to consider investments choices. And various marine-related business use this information to advocate and promote their industries. This information is also can also be used for resilience and the resilience context. This marine economy statistics can provide the upper bound of the amount of GDP and jobs at risk of loss from coastal hazards. And so this is the market-based side. But we are also now, as I mentioned before, we are also working on a long-term strategy to incorporate environmental accounting into, that would be the accounting for marine ecosystem services, into the national accounts. This is the natural capital accounting project. And this will be a more comprehensive approach to the measure of the blue economy. And it's actually part of a US government-wide strategy by the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy to develop a set of natural capital accounts that will include the marine environment. And this initiative was released last April during the Earth Day. So in terms of measures, just to finish here, there are three things that I like to highlight, three important things that I think we need to focus on when developing measures for the blue economy. First of all, is to develop robust definition of what you're planning to measure. This is the first and the most important step in measuring the blue economy. And I'll tell you, was the step that took us longer in those 5 years of work. And it should involve a lot of consultation with specialists in different areas of the marine economy, as well as stakeholders that are going to be using the information. You want to make sure the information is useful to the audience. This is very important, and it's not as easy as we thought that would be. And I'll tell you, for the account that we are using, that we just released, we had many consultations, including the international side. We worked with the OECD, we worked with other nations developing satellite accounts to make sure we have standard measures to be able to later on compare our measurements. And finally, the definitions that we use, and that is consistent with, I'll say, with what OECD is now using as well, is for all to include all activities that takes place in the marine environment that use essential inputs from the marine environment, like seafood processing, for example, produce goods and services for use in the marine environment, like navigation equipment, and activities that would not take place if not located in the proximity of the marine environment. And just to finish, the other two main points are: be very clear about your geography and boundaries.
Okay.
In our case, we didn't want to just focus on coastal areas. We want to include activities that occur inland, but also are dependent on the marine activities. And of course, the data. A lot of data and consultation and find the proper data. I'm going to finish here. Thank you so much.
No, thanks very much. And you know, I smile every time somebody says about data, because that continues to be the big issue. The sufficiency of the data, the gaps that exist. And you did mention about, especially in terms of the national capital accounts, or the accounting for natural capital. And one of the things that we realize is that some of these assets, some of these natural capital assets have been impacted, have diminished, have been severely impacted over time. And there is a need, as we try to measure the contribution, to look at how do we improve, or how do we restore some of those assets, or the value of those assets. And Terrence, I want to bring you into this, because you do have a really massive effort on restoring blue carbon in collaboration with the IDB in Jamaica, in an area in the southern part of Jamaica, where you're trying to do this, where you're trying to improve or restore some of these assets. Can those assets, services, products of the blue economy or blue carbon be restored? Terrence?
Can they be restored? I think they must be restored, and I think it's entirely feasible to restore them, and in good time. But before I start, I should really thank you and colleagues for inviting me to participate today. And thank the IDB, of course, for supporting this project. It's, as you heard in the introduction, fairly large area by our standards. It's strung out over 40 kilometers of coastline, and it amounts to about a little less than 2,000 hectares of degraded mangroves. It's really interesting as we've gone along, engaging the community from the start to ensure that they co-create and co-own, that their impressions about what has driven the process of die-off has hit many, many factual buttons. So that's an excellent start. But what's going on now, and should be finished in August, is a complete quantitative evaluation of everything from the reef all the way up to the highlands in Tarndon, in order to understand, especially the hydrology of the mangrove. Based on the findings to date, which I was just in Trinidad last week looking at preliminary outputs, we are going to have several credible options for nature-based solutions, and we'll have a plan in place and implement it starting November this year. So I'm going to stop there, Gerard, and ask you to point me in whichever direction you want me to hear off in order to expand.
No, certainly. I think one of the things that it ties in with something that Monica had mentioned. One, data, and I think the importance of gathering that baseline data, because often we have seen in some of the areas of trying to restore natural systems that there have been some missteps. But the critical element on all of this is ensuring that you have a baseline on which you build on. And I think that's why I would be critical to hear from how you're going about this. Often people may skim over the gathering of data, but I think from what your initial findings are, and there's been some surprises from your program of the importance of gathering this baseline information.
Okay, so thanks for the permission to dilate a bit. So, everything from the seaboard, the currents, the wave energy, wave directions, tidal excursions, weather patterns in the area, all quantitative, the beach profiles, the topography, the current coverage of the mangrove trees and their diversity. Then in the back end, all the hydrology having to do with the 3 river systems in the area, plus rainfall. And of course, historical evaluations of the prior contribution of the tremendous sugar irrigation waters that contributed there. Soil analysis, sediment analysis, all of that now I think is going to be available come July for modeling so that we can form our plan and implement it in November. It's been an excellent period for crawling through the mangroves. It's really tough work, but because it's so important to get it right instead of guessing and intuiting, we are committed and have been, and we've been working with really excellent contractors. So yes, everything from the water through the beach, into the mangrove and beyond the mangrove, up into the watershed in the mountains of Clarendon. Every single bit of that is important. Climate change considerations also have been built in, and those are a challenge, of course, here as well as elsewhere, but I'm pretty sure that we will be able to factor them in and make plans. One thing that I'd like to mention and maybe put on the table is that if we're unlucky, then as soon as we start, we might have the whole intervention destroyed by another powerful hurricane. And so plans for rapid assessment, and then importantly, the financing for re-restoration and maintenance, I think are critical areas for a group like this to consider.
No, I thanks very much for that. We always we recognize that we're in an area of high vulnerability to severe impacts from hurricanes, and this is something that in all our programming, as we look at the work within the region, the impacts of hurricanes continue to be an issue, but also the slow onset of climate change impacts. Let's not forget those. And those are also impacting your area. But you are in doing one of the things that you had not mentioned, and I'm going to pivot to it a little bit, especially with Claudia waiting, is you have been doing some innovative things in getting some of this information, the data, use of drones, and also looking at maybe artificial intelligence to fill some of those data gaps. And Claudia, from your perspective, and you're coming from the innovation, one of the innovation sections of the bank, what is the role in innovation, improving, boosting, or maintaining some of the work that Terence has been talking about in this area of the blue economy? Over to you. And I know it has been mentioned, so it's a good segue for you.
Yes, thank you, Gerard, and thanks for the invitation on the participation. And since we are talking about data, I just want to start on the relation of innovation and technology and big data as well. We're seeing from our perspective, from the bank perspective, how technology and innovation are being currently integrated in the blue economy more and more, both at the global level and also in our region. both in what we call blue tech and the optimal use and management of ocean resources. And I want to delve deeper into one example that has been mentioned already, which is the policy-based guarantee, building a social and inclusive economy, inclusive blue economy in the Bahamas. And in this program, basically, we had the opportunity to partner with the government of the Bahamas by developing a series of policy actions that are based on technological innovations. And so these technological innovations gave rise to policy reforms that at the same time were translated into an innovative financial instrument. And when we're talking about data, as you, Gerard, were mentioning on this program, one of the issues that we work on was the availability on data for monitor and evaluation of policies. I think our partners and our colleagues from Stanford might be here as we work together. For example, one of the policies for marine protected areas involves an intensive use of satellite data, geographic information systems, and other technological innovations to be able to monitor the impact of some of the policies that were implemented, such as the impact of nature-based solutions on marine protected areas and on coastal protection, and also on fisheries. Still on this example on the Bahamas, for example, another issue where we supported the use of information for informed policymaking is in the management of fisheries, where now also we're seeing that the use of geographical information systems, special technologies, sensors, trackers, improve information on fisheries and fisheries management, enable them to get certifications such as the marine stewardship certification, as it was the case in the Bahamas. And also for enforcement and protection of the ocean. Also, another example is the use of technology to monitor vessels to enforce legal fishing, and also digitalization of blue economies activities. For example, digitalization of fishing permits and port operations. This introduction of digital technologies for activities on businesses and economic activities on the blue economy provide more information on what's really happening in real time, and also more transparency and accountability. Since you asked me about also innovation and technologies besides data, also I want to mention another program that was mentioned before, the Complete Caribbean program, which is a partnership with donors from the Caribbean Development Bank, UK and Canada, in which we are supporting firms and innovators and entrepreneurs that do new things in the Caribbean. I think we're seeing some examples in this panel as well, but we're seeing things happening, and we're seeing very interesting things happening. Again, use of technology for management of fisheries and certification. I think it was mentioned in the video, but we're also seeing like very on the edge things like blockchain parametric insurance to protect coral reef from hurricane damages, and changes in the way tourism and education is happening, where technologies such as virtual reality and metaverse are used not only to promote tourism location, but also to promote education on how restoration is done. So what we're seeing happening is the inclusion of technologies, as a recap, in policymaking, both for informed policymaking, but also for better accountability, data management, more information. And all this has been integrating what is the activity of the private sector with the sustainability of the oceans. As it was mentioned, many of our operations are now integrating both parts, promoting also a productive ocean and a more healthy ocean.
No, great. And and thank you for the overview of that, because that gets me into this one of the things that I really think a lot of people want to know. And it is we have a UN Ocean Conference coming up. We have there will be maybe another World Ocean Day next year. I'm a decision maker. I'm a community. I am an investor. I'm an academic. I am a development bank. What the one thing that we think we should do? Sorry about that. We should do or should take note of regarding the blue economy, a future trend in the blue economy. And I'll start with quickly just one thing that Brad said. We should take note of this with regard to the blue economy. Claudia, I'll start with you quickly.
Yes, I think the use of technology has allowed us to have a much broader vision of what the ocean can bring to us. So the traditional vision of blue economy as just maybe fisheries and tourism is expanding thanks to technology, but the technological innovations have also to be gone hand in hand with the sustainability of the ocean.
Thank you. Yuri, since I see you next.
Being a risk manager in my present capacity, I think it's important to pay attention going forward to how do you establish risk management and resilience policy and operations frameworks for yet undeveloped blue economy offshore investments at scale. So right now we do a lot of work in probabilistic risk assessment, and we look at the probable occurrence of hazards and losses, but a lot of that is concentrated on terrestrial asset classes. Roads, schools, transportation. We look both at indirect and direct. And I think we need to begin to wrap our mind around marine asset classes, both man-made assets as well as marine ecosystem assets, as to which Monica was speaking to earlier. And here is where I think the valuation comes in. So even now, traditionally, when we are doing post-impact damage and loss assessments from, let's say, hurricane events, a lot of that work is concentrated in terrestrial asset classes and sectorally, and there is I would say, a deficit of analysis and modeling on marine asset classes, both, let's say, the maritime economy and as well as marine ecosystems, because of the deficit in data. So this is something that I'd like to flag.
Great. And since you had mentioned Monica and valuation, Monica, what's the one thing that we should be looking at?
Yeah, I think I would say it is, as we're talking about data, I think it's the marine, the knowledge-based economy. We are, with advance of technologies, we are able to collect more and more data. So data exists, right? But I think the biggest challenge that we have is actually how we can better use this data and apply the data that we have to decision making. And there are some challenges that I think we need to pay attention to be able to use this information. Like, for example, we have the technology challenges, like to really absorb. So we have observation platforms, we have people in the field, and we also have satellites providing all this information. But do we have the right technology to actually use this data, process, and make it a timely, available in a timely manner for being actionable and to actually keep pace with the rapid environmental changes? Also, do we have the right workforce Is there anything that we need to invest in the workforce to be able to actually use and understand this information? And yeah, and finally, the collaboration, foster collaboration between who has the data, who needs the data, and
Yeah, and bridging the two. No, thank you. Terrence, bring it home. One thing.
Okay, I'll call it one thing, but it is threads of many things. And it is, you know, we have these assets, these blue economic assets, and we all want to protect them, and we all need to expand them as much as possible. And I think one thing I would mention from both experience and common sense is therefore the requirement to invest in parallel with the ecological investment, invest in people, especially the people who live there and interact with it. When I start at a very high level, science literacy, it's a global problem. Science literacy is very poorly imparted in our formal education system. And we have multiple unfortunate outcomes to absence of effective science literacy. Science literacy within the context of ecology and environment is even more critical when it comes to maintaining these blue assets. As a derivative of that, and perhaps supported by that, knowledge, attitude, practices of the people in how they interact with the assets to sustainably use them. So one thing, it is dual parallel investments in the people, their knowledge, and therefore their capacity to utilize as well as create within the blue economy space.
Thank you. No, this has been a really rich discussion. You know, and I know we can expand on and on, but I think Terrence, in that last note about people, their understanding, supporting these efforts, understanding their needs and how there's this interaction. I think it's one of the critical areas, together with the other things that we know, data, information, finance, etc. But we always have to remember a key element of the blue economy is people. Thank you very much. I really appreciated this conversation. I hope those who have been listening gained quite a lot. And Golda, I'm turning it back to you to continue this conversation on the blue economy.
Yes, indeed, Jared. Thank you so much to you, and thank you to our panelists as well. We have a few moments left in our event today to ask a couple questions of Professor John Agard and to have a discussion about the IPCC 6th assessment report and the blue economy. So as I bring Professor Agard in, I'd just like to tell you a bit about who he is. Professor John Agard is the director of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship in Trinidad and Tobago. He is also the executive director of the Global Institute for Climate Smart and Resilient Development. The UN Secretary General appointed Professor Agard as co-chair of the 2023 United Nations Global Sustainability Development Report. He has also been a coordinating lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, the first Global Assessment Chapter 5, Pathways to a Sustainable Future. Dr. Agard reviewed and edited for small islands in the current 6th assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and has previously served as the lead author of the IPCC's previous 4th and 5th assessments. Professor Agard, it's good to have you here in this discussion with us. Welcome.
Thanks you for giving me an opportunity to talk.
Of course, of course. So, Professor Agard, jumping right in, what are some of the main issues raised in this IPCC report related to climate change impacts on oceans?
Well, the IPCC report, it has a lot of data in it because they go on evidence, finds overwhelming evidence that the global warming has already reached above 1 degree centigrade, above pre-industrial levels, and is making the ocean warmer, more acidic, and less productive. And they have provided all of the data. And they've also mentioned that melting glaciers and ice sheets are causing sea level rise, and extreme weather events are becoming more severe. So this is having a major effect. The report demonstrates the risk to the ocean economy if emissions are allowed to increase. But it also highlights the opportunities from the emerging blue economy in which sustainable ocean-based industries can help reduce carbon emissions and create resilient coastal communities. I remember very well when I met at IDB, Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley. She said that Barbados has 400 times more water than land. And so their plan is to exploit the oceans in a sustainable way, in fact. And that has kept in my mind. Ocean is an opportunity, and it has to be exploited in a sustainable way, not destroyed.
Of course, thank you for reminding us about that. I often hear at the bank and outside as well that in the Caribbean, there are small island developing states, but big sea states. And so a follow-up question is, what do you envisage to be the renewed role of ocean economies in tackling climate change?
Well, there's a lot of data about damage to marine life. The report states that the ocean has absorbed more than 90% of the heat in the climate system caused by man-made carbon emissions. And ocean warming reduces levels of oxygen and nutrients in the water. And by 2100, the ocean will absorb 2 to 4 times more heat than it has in the past 50 years, even if global warming is limited to 2 degrees centigrade. And that seems to be not likely to happen. And 5 to 7 times more at high emissions levels. So the ocean has also absorbed 20 to 30% of human-induced carbon dioxide since the 1980s, increasing the acidity of water. So all of the data is provided. Ocean warming and acidification are damaging and disrupting marine life. Fish populations have declined. The report also says that that will fall further, especially in tropical areas like Latin America and the Caribbean, though there may be increases in the Arctic. Overall, the report expects 15% decline in the total mass of marine mammals by 2100 and a drop of up to 25% in fish catches. So this is a disaster unfolding. Revenue potential in the fishing industry could fall by around 10% by 2050 in most of the world's fishing countries. So, and one of the other things they mentioned was that tourism, another important sector in the ocean economy, will be badly affected by climate change. And the loss of coral reefs caused by marine heat waves and acidification could lead to coastal tourism to lose up to $3 billion per year, even if global warming is limited to below 2 degrees centigrade, and up to 5.8 billion annually if carbon emissions increase further. And the report warns about all of these things, and that is happening faster than we expected.
So the question then is, what can we do? What are we doing? What can we do in terms of maintaining the health of our oceans and their mitigating impact on climate change?
Well, there are some blue economy benefits. And this is some of the positive news. It's not all a disaster. The IPCC report highlights how the blue economy can help mitigate carbon emissions and adapt to climate change, creating many social and economic benefits. For instance, as has already been discussed, restoration of vegetated coastal communities, ecosystems such as mangroves, tidal marshes, and seagrass meadows could absorb and store around 0.5% of annual global carbon emissions. And I think Professor Terence Forrester spoke about that, or what was going on in Jamaica. And these ecosystems also provide improved storm protection to coastal communities, because on the coastline, they protect, you from storms and so forth, and also improve water quality and fish stocks. And so one of the things mentioned was public-private partnerships are needed to finance large-scale ecosystem restoration projects. So it can't only be public-private partnerships. And was mentioned earlier about there has to be an investment in people. They're not doing the wrong things. So there's blue economy is creating new opportunities for shipping companies to develop zero carbon fuels and propulsion technologies to cut shipping carbon emissions by 50% by 2050. And there's also mention about offshore renewable energy technologies such as wind and tidal and wave and algal biofuels and thermal salinity gradients to mitigate carbon emissions. So all of the news is not negative. You have to concentrate on the blue economy benefits as part of the way forward.
Of course. Thank you, Professor Agard. And I want to give you a final word. We have on the Zoom call, as well as on live social media platforms, quite a few people from Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as countries outside of the region joining us. What would be your final word to them? It's quite a mixed bag of professionals that we have. What would be your word to them, given the statement that you made about people changing habits and people having a role to play in protecting the health of the blue economy?
Well, that is one of the key, ways forward. So although we have mentioned about solutions, including offshore renewables, shipping, ecosystem restoration, fisheries and aquaculture, and we've had some presentations on that, and seabed carbon storage, to improve the nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. It's very, very important about the investment in people. These gains are significant. Ocean solutions could save 4 billion tons of carbon by 2030 and more than 11 billion tons by 2050. But you have to invest in people and go after emissions from coal-fired power stations, for example. So these are some of the methods going forward, and only people can do that. Yeah. This is why you need to provide knowledge to people so that they don't do the wrong things, but go in a positive direction.
Of course. Thank you so much, Professor Agard, for the time. It was an honor to be able to ask you a few questions. And that really brings us to the end of our event today to commemorate World Oceans Day. As you just mentioned, Professor Agard, it's about knowledge sharing as well. And so we invite you to visit the brand new Sustainable Islands platform. It's hosted by the Inter-American Development Bank, sustainableislands.iadb.org, and find out more about the work that the bank is doing in the region to maintain the health of the ocean economy and to advance the economy as well. Thank you to Gerard and to all of our panelists, and to you as well, Professor Agard. We hope that you enjoyed our session today, and most importantly, that you learned a lot. Thank you.